So let me ask you a question here about well-being, because this is something I've wanted to ask you about, but we never seem to get to. Okay. So you think that we should maximize well-being, and that's part of your proposition, which I don't entirely disagree with, by the way, that we should ground our value structures in facts. But there's a black box problem there, like I think the black box problem about the a priori structure that we use to extract the facts of the world out. And the black box problem is, if we could measure well-being, it's like, yeah, that's a big problem, Sam. Like, we have measures of well-being, and they're terrible.
Yeah.
Like, they are. If
no, I'm agreeing. I don't think but it's not a problem for my thesis. We don't have measures for anything we care about, really.
Yeah, but I mean, if your thesis is that if we had the measures of well-being that were appropriate, we could use them in a positive way, and the response is, but we don't have those measures, it's like, then what do we do?
Oh, no, we have measures. I mean, this conversation is a measure. I don't like that. That's a measure. Right? You step on my toe and I say, ow. That's a measure. Don't do that again.
But that's not a measure of your well-being. It might be a measure of your trait neuroticism.
Well, it's a measure of.
But I mean that.
These are non-points.
No, but I mean this technically. Yeah. If you look at the well-being measures that we have, yes, they degenerate into measures of neuroticism.
No,
that's all they are.
But we don't have measures of certainty, of belief, of compassion, of joy. Any of these conscious states, we have neural correlates of some of them, but we don't have. There's no helmet I can put on you.
How do we use facts about them to orient ourselves in the world then?
Because we're doing that. We're doing this all the time.
You've got an instantaneous measure, though. You've got an instantaneous measure of well-being. We can all check with ourselves, see how we feel. But
and it's possible to be wrong about that.
Right. Always wrong about it.
But it degrades as you get away from the individual's ability to check internally. On the other
even
hand,
the internal thing isn't reliable,
it's
because
not
lots
reliable,
of times you're happy when you're doing things that are terrible
and
for
you
yourself.
could take a drug that would make you feel very good and would cause you to take apart your own life because it would.
You mean like cocaine, for example?
Right. It would destroy the motivational structure that gets you to do stuff of value that you're
right. So we can't use emotion, moment-to-moment emotion, as an indicator of well-being.
The instantaneous is not good, but you have a parallel problem. It looks to me like the exact mirror image, which is that you've got an integrative, long-term measure of well-being instantiated in an evolutionary belief system, but it's coming apart because we are living in circumstances that are less well mirrored. The present does not mirror the past, and therefore these truths, which you believe are timeless, are degrading rapidly.
That's part of that's exactly right, yes.
Okay, so...
Right, well, so there are two things there. One, you bring up an ancillary but very important point, which is that moral progress here is often the result of moving from our story-driven, protagonist-driven intuitions to something far more quantified, right? So I mean, this is a classic, moral study done by Paul Slovak, who I'm sure you are aware of, where you tell people about one needy little girl in Africa, and you give her a name and show her picture, and what you elicit is the maximum altruistic, compassionate response from subjects. You go to another group of subjects, you tell them about the same little girl, give her the same name, but also tell them about her needy little brother, right, who has the same need, and their response diminishes, right? Just the addition of a single person diminishes the response, and this is a moral fallacy that we're all living out every day, because if you care about this one little girl, you should care at least as much about the fate of her and her brother. And when you add statistics to it...
No, you shouldn't, because you'll exhaust yourself. No, you shouldn't.
This is a bug, not a feature.
Man, you'll exhaust yourself in the attempt.
No, because we need...
What, are you going to care for 100 people with the same intensity that you care for one?
This is what this software flaw gets us. It gets us people who will watch for hours a day with effortless and tear-stained compassion the saga of the little girl who fell down the well, but who will blithely turn the channel when they're hearing about a genocide that is raging and hundreds of thousands have already died.
Sam, right? Listen, guys.
This is something we have to correct for this. I'm not talking about person. No, but you're misunderstanding me to great effect here. I'm not saying that you should personally be overwhelmed by the death toll every day. I'm not saying that it's functional for you and I to each personally get up each morning and just drink deep of the full horror of all the bad luck that is spread.
No,
all
maybe
over
it
the world.
is, but maybe we can't handle it.
But as societies, we need, when you're talking about how we spend our money, how we apportion foreign aid, the kinds of wars we fight or don't fight, the kinds of then we have to correct for what is in fact a moral illusion, which is we know that if we tell we tell one compelling story about a little girl, right, we could go to war over that, right, whereas we won't be motivated by a genocide. That's the kind of thing that moves whole societies now. And if you add to it the bogus religious sanctities, if we burned a Quran on this stage tonight, the rest of our lives would be spent in hiding, right? Because of how motivated people would be to address that pseudo problem, right? That's the world we're living in, and civilization, insofar as we have a purchase on it, is a matter of correcting for those errors. And
but
religion, for the most part, not across the board, but for the most part, is standing in the way of those course corrections.
Well, okay, there is a tremendous amount to unpack in that. I mean, and like in some sense a surprising amount. It's like, well, we're wired to feel intense empathy for individuals who are close to us, and we can be told stories in a manner that makes that system manifest itself. And everyone and their dog thinks that that's a wonderful thing, and we call that empathy, right? And empathy has a narrow domain of utility, as it turns out, because maybe if you were all who you should be, you'd be weeping constantly for the catastrophic fate of sentient beings on the earth, but you can't handle it, you know what I mean? It's that you can barely handle your own suffering, and maybe you can handle a bit of the suffering of your family, and more power to you if you could rectify that, and if you were better human beings, maybe you could expand that outwards. But the fact that our empathy doesn't scale up to the level of genocide with the same intensity that we treat instances of individual suffering isn't an indication that we're irrational. It's just an indication that we're limited.
Well,
That's
not true.
I think this is an indication of exactly the problem of our evolved structures